Good day, brothers and sisters. Mango Thunderslice again with another message of why the world is a very persistent illusion in many cases, just like Albert Einstein said of time, right? Time is an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And I can say the exact same thing about Einsteinian physics, relativity, and most of the general conclusions that people draw using that model. So this is part 103 of Ether Physics. Basically, this is called There Is No Settled Science, okay? This term gets bandied around like it's this political, jargon, this Orwellian newspeak, settled science, settled science. What that means to your subconscious is unquestionable, not even to the unconscious, that's what it means. The science is settled, we've already answered these questions, so let's move on to other things. But in many cases, these, settled science instances are really just a pile of assumptions, and when you really start to examine the individual assumptions, all of a sudden the bigger picture starts to come into much more doubt and uncertainty and it comes into question. And so, so I'm reading about how the Portland school district is now banning, they don't like the word banning in this case, they say we're just updating and editing the text, right? So they're banning any textbook from the school system that uses ambivalent speech like may or might with regards to anthropogenic climate change, man-made global warming. They are removing all books that say human carbon emissions may contribute to global warming and climate change. No, now they're replacing it with 100% certainty. Yes, this is what's happening. There is no doubt. We are 100% sure, and it's as solid as the sun coming up tomorrow morning, right? That's how they think that climate change science is. But again, it's this cheerleader of science mentality, this bandwagon mentality that leads people into this frame of mind, because science, there can be no settled science. Do you understand? Science is a culture of doubt. It's a culture of questioning and criticizing and looking at the assumptions that we're using and finding out which ones actually are valid by experiment, not by math, but by experiment, okay? And when we look at the actual experimental data, this universe is mysterious. It is not certain. It is not well understood. We don't have a firm grasp as a society, as a culture of gravity. No, we don't. No, we pretend like we understand gravity and what it's all about, but we don't. We think we understand light. No, we don't understand light either. There's so much behavior of photons and just light in general, different spectra, that frankly baffles the majority of scientists. They might disagree with me and claim, well, we know this or we know that, and that's true, but the problem is when you take these simple observations and then all of a sudden you start building this whole political philosophy involving, your science, like the climate change thing, right? So now the Portland school district is banning material that even says, hey, there's a possibility that climate change is induced by other external factors like the sun, okay? They are not willing to concede that that possibility even exists. They are so resolute that they have the truth. And it's hilarious because they don't. Even the lowest, most conservative of the warming projections for this planet have failed. And the temperature has not even kept pace with that one. If your model of the climate was perfect and there was no room for error and you have 100% mastery of this, the temperature on Earth would be exactly in line with those models. Those models, if you have included every single factor perfectly represented in your formula, then the temperature of Earth would be following exactly in your model. And it's not. Okay, like I've said, there's no room for argument when you look at the actual data. And the data says, no, the atmosphere is not warming. No, the sea is not warming. It is basically, we are in the middle of a cyclical transition, which is driven by the sun into what could be termed a mini ice age, a term that basically just doesn't just connote a decrease in global temperature, but also a prolonged period of extreme weather instances as a result of the Earth's magnetic field decreasing in power. And this is a direct consequence of the sun. Okay, we now have direct statistical proof that earthquakes underneath our feet are caused by solar factors. And in the global warming models, they only have one variable for solar power, which is just how much light it's giving off, right? Just how much it's shining. But there's so much more going on. And this ties right in with the ether physics kind of realm of knowledge, is because the sun is an electric being. And until you understand the electrical environment between the Earth and the sun, the electromagnetic interface, then virtually all of nature, all of the climate is still going to remain a mystery to you. You know, basically, even in the global warming model, they assume that most of the warming doesn't come from the carbon, comes from the water vapor. You know, the water vapor forcing mechanism. They assume that for every instance of warming due to carbon dioxide, they assume that that heat making more water vapor, more water evaporating, will amplify that effect by a factor of 3. Okay, so they just assume, they almost pull this number right out of their ass. Times 3, that's how much it's going to be. You know, and this is the 100% certain science of climate change. Even in their own press release, they say, you know, we don't want to run the risk of people getting the wrong idea about this emerging science. Let's take a step back and realize how ridiculous that statement is. We don't want people to get the wrong idea about this emerging field. If a field is emerging, that means you don't have a 100% certain grasp of what you're talking about. The weatherman on TV can't predict the weather a week in advance more than just generalities, and you're saying that 100 years from now you know exactly what the climate is going to be? Do you realize how absurd this is on its face, but also when we look at the details, it's still absurd? And 97% of scientists, oh, it's settled science because some opinion poll just says that scientists, from our artificially narrow definition of what it means to be a climate scientist, support our politically driven theory. And, you know, it's not to say that human emissions don't influence the climate, but when you compare that to the influence of the sun, even when it comes to the production of water vapor, solar-driven factors are so much infinitely more compelling to the Earth's climate system than the trace gas increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. You know, I'm really disturbed by the pollution that takes place on our planet, but we have this wild goose chase going on known as global warming, and it's based off of a fundamental misreading of our assumptions and how solid they are about the universe. And, you know, another character I'd like to introduce in the course of this discourse is a man named Maurice Allais. I don't know, he's French. I may not be pronouncing his last name correctly. It's Allais, Maurice Allais. And he was he's a Nobel-winning economist, but he was good at a lot of things. He was a really smart guy. And so he won the Nobel Prize for certain theories in economics, you know, about the efficient utilization of resources in a free and open market. You know, it's funny how smart people always generally gravitate toward the same kind of themes, right? Libertarians are inevitably smarter than the average person, I've found in my experience, because when you question these dogmatic assumptions given to you by the herd, and you start actually, as an individual, questioning this and that, you start to build a picture that doesn't support many of the government narratives, right? So, examining climate change, we find that no, it's not as solid as proposed, and you know, we're building an entire future for ourselves on the assumption that it's going to keep warming. What if it doesn't keep warming? What if cold continues to wreck the whole Midwestern states and their food production in the United States? I mean, we're looking at food increases this year as a result of huge cold, devastating events throughout, like, the flyover zone of America, all the middle states. You know, they're having, and up in Canada too, all across the food production states, we're seeing massive decreases in production because of radical cold events. We're seeing more tornadoes, intense storms. We're seeing more earthquakes of greater intensity. And it's like, again, can you really say that because carbon dioxide we've got more earthquakes? Like, what are you smoking? Okay? It doesn't make any sense. Listen to yourself. All right? I've been that guy. I've been the alarmist. I've bought the government line, hook, line, and sinker. But then as I grew older, I started to realize that I've been lied to. And, you know, I can't stop somebody from trying to sell me a lie, but I can stop myself from buying it. And so, yeah, back to Maurice Allais. Basically, this is a guy who pretty much took a look at Dayton Miller's work on, you know, the variances of the speed of light, the fundamental proof that general and special relativity is wrong, and that the ether, the cosmological ether, does exist, and it allows energy to flow through space. Basically, and space is not space, actually. It's not a vacuum. It's actually a kind of fluid known as the ether. And Maurice Allais, there's some very interesting work that he did. He found that during solar eclipses, right, the sun, the moon, and the earth all line up. He found that he was just tracing a pendulum, and he saw, just checking the data on how this pendulum was swinging. And what he found on 2 separate occasions was that during the total solar eclipse, the pendulum all of a sudden started moving in a different direction. It started changing the angle that it was swinging. And, you know, this is another curious anomaly that conventional understanding of gravity just has no explanation for. They think, well, maybe the shadow caused the temperature of the air to change, or maybe, you know, the temperature of the ground changed. It's like they make up all these ridiculous things just to hold their theory, to hold their rank in this priesthood of astronomy. When, you know, realistically we should say, no, this is obviously a real effect. It was confirmed by tons more teams of scientists all over the world. And so we've got a pendulum changing its gravitational pattern when the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun are aligned. Okay, we don't understand gravity. We really don't. Panther and I went to the mystery spot in Santa Cruz, right? I don't know if any of you guys have been to this place or places like him. This is a total trip, okay? This is a place where the gravity of the Earth is not the same as you're used to, all right? Panther and I, like, you know, we've got a normal height differential, and we stand face to face right at this spot, and, you know, we'd be different heights, and then we'd switch spots, and all of a sudden we were the same height. I'm not joking you, all right? They have a pendulum in there, a big iron pendulum, or lead pendulum rather. Lead is not influenced by electromagnetic fields. It repels electromagnetic fields. So there's no way for this to be kind of like a scam, a circus type thing. And when you pushed the pendulum in one direction, it was like butter, and it just flew, just whoa, like there's no resistance. And then you go on the other side of the pendulum and you push it, and it's like, whoa, it's like triple the gravity. It's so heavy, and it doesn't want to go that way. You can like lean off of corners, you know, and you don't fall because the gravity is literally at an angle. And water goes uphill, balls roll uphill in this spot, and it's a total trip. And, you know, people, hard-nosed, federally funded university graduate physicists, and they can say whatever they want about gravity, but the fact is, until you can explain things like the mystery spot, things like the Allais effect with the pendulums changing during the solar eclipse, you don't have an understanding of gravity at all. And so to say that it's settled science and we'll just go along with all of the wild, radical postulations of astronomy just because Einstein, is not scientific, it's religious. It's religious dogma, and we need to transcend that as a species if we're going to actually solve the problems that we're facing on this planet, which are more than just carbon dioxide, but radiation leaks, oil leaks. We've got major, I mean, just the radiation leaks alone is going to take us hundreds of years, and it's going to require, you know, lots of people spending a lot of time and energy just to clean it up. So, in summary, there is no such thing as settled science, whether it's global warming or climate change or the nature of gravity, the nature of light. And we really do ourselves a disservice when we downplay the contributions of people who we don't understand their work already. Okay, we need to have an open mind. And so when people come to us like the electric universe guys, the plasma cosmologists, and say, no, it's not empty space, there's actually energy flowing throughout, and there's an ether that binds all of it together. We can harness that energy, guys. You have to understand the reason that this is so controversial is because if this is true, then 0-point energy, all of that is totally valid. And, you know, the pyramids themselves are like giant orgone accumulators. The Great Pyramids, they're made of conductive stone encapsulated on the outside by insulating stone. I might have that reversed, but, you know, in the cathedrals of ancient Europe with the pipe organs, they built them out of, you know, conductive stone and put an insulating metal cap. And they'd play these music tones on this pipe organ, and the people inside the church would have these profound religious experiences through the power of sound and frequency and vibration. And so, you know, basically we have this whole priesthood that's been wowing people with their knowledge of something that, you know, is ancient. Our ancient ancestors understood the nature of reality. We will too, once we learn to stop relying on figures like Einstein as divine authority and we start to question the nature of reality. And so, yeah, basically let me know if you have any thoughts. Basically, I'll keep continuing these videos, but that sort of summarizes the main points I wanted to get out about the ether, that there is scientific proof, 100%, yes there is. It has been duplicated and confirmed. And so it's a very silly thing when people walk around like they have total mastery of the whole universe, and they put down anybody who believes in ghosts or UFOs or psychic phenomena as that's just a bunch of malarkey. It's a bunch of bullshit, and, you know, we're not going to put any stock in that. But remember that everything we have today was once a wild fantasy. I'm recording this on a little handheld device, and it has more resolution than even the finest cameras did, you know, only 15 years ago. 10 years ago even, and, you know, everything around us was the dream of somebody in the past. And if we want to know what the future holds, we should ask ourselves, you know, who are the people thinking outside of the box, and what are they focusing on, and who built this world for us, like men like Tesla, okay, and what were they studying? This is the trail that I'm following, the rabbit hole that I'm climbing down, and it doesn't stop. It keeps on going. The more you research these things, the more you realize that, wow, it's not just a conspiracy theory and, oh, I read it on Snopes and it's all bullshit. No, if you start doing the research yourself, you'll find that the universe is truly mysterious, and it's a wonderful place, and let's explore it. Mango and Space Panther exploring the universe, and you should too. Cheers.